I don't stand side by side with nobody till I bleed with them first.
What did we just see? You probably think this world is a dream come true.
When I step into this ring, yeah, bro, I am addicted.
Don't sleep on Luca!
Maybe tomorrow we'll all wear 42.
If you fight for your dreams will fight for you.
AEW Revolution 2023 was generational, and it was almost a pay-per-view I missed. See, AEW was on a hot streak for me. I had been tuning in to almost every Dynamite since Full Gear. The entire month of January was full throttle. They debuted in Seattle with a stacked card. The LA show was my first ever wrestling event, and it was perfect. They followed it up with good showings in Fresno and Lexington to close out the month. February started off strong with a great show in Dayton and an absolute great night filled with championship matches in El Paso. And then things took a weird turn. The Laredo show was very poorly received by fans. They had a decent showing in Phoenix, and then they had their final show before Revolution. That was pretty good. It's just that the hype wasn't at its peak exactly. I looked at the card heading in and just didn't know if I would be tuning in. The feud between Starks and Jericho wasn't exactly one of my favorites. I wasn't really at all interested in either of Jack Perry or Christian Cage. House of Black versus the Elite had my interest, but I wanted to see more interactions between the group before their inevitable match. I had a very sort of hands-off sort of interest in the Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter versus Saraya and Toni Storm feud, in a sense that it didn't have my full attention, but that was mainly because I just wanted to give the feud space and time to grow and develop before giving any full judgments on it. Page and Moxley, on the other hand, had my full attention, and we'll hear more on that later. Samoa Joe as TNT champion has been great, to the point that I have a video coming out later this week detailing the trilogy between him and Darby Allin. Wardlow, on the other hand, has kind of been cold for me for a long time, so I wasn't too interested in this rematch. Speaking of no interest at all, I totally lost interest in the tag titles once the Guns won them, and felt the same way once I saw the Fatal 4-Way participants. Finally, MJF versus Bryan Danielson has been brewing for quite some time, and it has its interests, but I'm not the biggest fan of MJF, and even with the Iron Man stipulation, it was kind of tough to sell it to me because I already knew Danielson wasn't winning, and, that's not a knock on, to say that, he should have won, because booking-wise, I don't know how much that makes sense to other people, but it's mainly just because I'm a big Bryan Danielson fan. But before there's any outrage at anything I'm saying, I just want everyone to know that was how I was feeling heading into the pay-per-view. It was still a great card, but I just didn't know if I wanted to pay to see it. I'll be honest. I was even looking all over to see if anybody was streaming the event so I wouldn't have to pay for it. But at the last second, I said, screw it. Let's just buy and watch the damn thing, and I'm more inclined to do this with AEW because when it comes to their pay-per-views, they rarely let me down. And, well, I'm clearly making a video on it, and you see the title of the video, so just get right into it. AEW Revolution was generational and exceeded my expectations, and genuinely was one of the greatest pay-per-views I have ever watched. To start off, Starks and Jericho had a good match and set the overall tone for the rest of the show, which was, our roster is great and its future is even brighter. This match was really great in the sense that, we got to see the overall story being Jericho working over Ricky Starks' taped up ribs the entire match. And we got to see Ricky Starks get a definitive victory. He outlasted interference. He outlasted a shot to the ribs with a bat. He beat Jericho definitively, even getting a cool sort of counter to the Judas effect. And the feud looks to be done with, and Ricky Starks is back on track with a bright future ahead of him. Next was Jack Perry versus Christian Cage in a final burial match. This is essentially a bury alive match. And, you heard me at the start say that I wasn't too interested in this feud. Well, this match got me invested into at least, the culmination of it. And it was a really good match because the stipulation really fit the mood of the feud. These two have been going at it for months, and its sole purpose was to test Jack Perry, to see if he could show a more aggressive killer instinct side. And these two really brought that intensity, and once again, a young star was pushed forward. Jack Perry finally demonstrated that killer instinct by hitting the concerto on Cage and laying him to rest in that casket. We also got a pretty funny looking visual where as soon as he slammed the lid, that casket went down. But, you know, it was a great match. And, you know, now he's looking forward to trying to win his first singles title in AEW by the end of the year. Next is a match that after it finished, I thought was a match of the night. The House of Black versus the Elite was great stuff and totally epitomizes what these titles and its division is supposed to be like. Could there have been more build to this match? Yes. Does that affect the overall match and story told throughout? Nope. The House of Black have one of the best presentations in wrestling and also have the plus of being great in-ring workers. And that pairs excellently with the Elite, high-octane workers. One thing I loved about this match was just how much commentary added to the story. They talked about how the Elite have been a team longer than the House of Black. They talked about the Elite being able to work more cohesively, and that was in no small part to their styles being very similar. The phrasing they used was cut from the same cloth. But that could also be a disadvantage for them, as the House of Black have very different, distinct styles of wrestling. The House of Black can game plan for the Elite as one since their styles are so similar. But the Elite have to game plan for 3 different individuals who also have a way of combining each of their styles into one unique, effective offense. And the match that ensued was great. We got Omega and Matthews in the ring finally. We had Brody King dominating anytime he was in, and Malachi Black showcasing his swift offense. One thing I loved was showcasing the Elite's lack of planning and composure. I brought up earlier about having to plan for the different styles. We also see, you know, like the best example I can give of this is Matt Jackson tags in and he signals he wants to face Brody King. And this fails epically as King goes on to destroy Matt and dominate anytime he's in there. Even commentary points out that the momentum shifts anytime Brody King is in the ring. Julia Hart does excellent work and even takes an accidental V-trigger from Omega, and this prompts another thing I love and honestly want to see more of in wrestling. Omega not giving a damn. He shrugs it off, basically saying she had it coming for interfering. We need more wrestlers being smart and not allowing them to get distracted by basic things like this. Omega still eats it though as he turns around and takes a black mass followed by probably the greatest sell of the black mass we've ever seen. Props to Omega on that one. We get multiple false finishes across the board before finally the House of Black win the trios titles. A great surprise that puts forth another fresh crop of talent. And the post-match even sets up another story as Omega is visibly upset at the loss and leaves with Callis rather than the Bucks. This is my little call for Omega to defend his IWGP US Championship against Brody King. Please, hopefully. Next, we had the match that I was most worried about heading into. After the Guns won the tag titles, I was convinced Tony Khan would do anything for the sake of shock factor. That means I was not going to be surprised if Saraya won the championship to add quote-unquote fuel to the feud. Jamie Hayter has slowly grown into one of my favorite women's wrestlers and is probably my favorite in the American scene right now. Her presentation is elite and she has gotten herself over with the crowd solely through wrestling ability alone. I'd be a fool not to mention just how great her vibrant gear this time around looks, and the pink highlights in her hair were a perfect addition to the look. Always looks and carries herself like a star. The actual match that followed was pretty good as well. Ruby and Jamie really clicked, and I really want to see more of them, especially a one-on-one, and maybe we'll get that after the post-match angle, but Jamie thankfully retains, and we get a post-match angle like I mentioned, where we see, you know, we think Ruby's going to side with Baker and Hayter, but then she turns and aligns herself with Saraya and Storm. Like I said at the beginning, I'm going to be fair and allow for this story to play out. As long as Hayter is champion and continues to put on heaters with AEW's plethora of talent and hopefully soon outside talent, I welcome whatever this story brings. Next up is probably one of the most brutal matches I have ever seen. Hangman Adam Page versus Jon Moxley in a Texas death match. I'm letting you know right now, I'm not going to say too much about this match. I know earlier I said we'll hear more about that earlier, and by that I mean this match and overall feud has been so great, I'm going to write about it for a future video. So all you need to know for now is that Hangman and Moxley are two sick individuals. They put on an all-time great match, and I am really looking forward to a reinvigorated Hangman Page. One of my favorites that I just can't wait to see back on track. Personally, it was my match of the night. The next two matches, though, were a bit of a break for me. Joe and Wardlow never really kicked into its second gear. And, this is especially a big thing after, he just had that trilogy of matches with Darby Allin that were really great. But still, the match serves its purpose of putting Wardlow back on top and hoping to give him a better reign than the first one. The Fatal 4-Way Tag match was a lot better than most expected. Orange Cassidy and Danhausen worked together great. The Guns and Triple J were great heel teams. The Acclaimed are still over like Rover. And at the end, we get the return of FTR, The action was great, but again, just didn't have my interest like the other match. And don't let my lack of interest fool you, though. Even if I'm not speaking too heavily on certain matches, that doesn't mean that they weren't great. This was a top quality pay-per-view, and the main event was nonetheless MJF versus Bryan Danielson in a 60-minute Iron Man match. I know how Bryan Danielson is, so trust me, I was afraid he was going to do an Iron Man match where there was only one fall and it takes place in the final seconds of the match. But nope, we got an absolute classic of a match that showed us different sides of MJF. An MJF that had to strategize once Danielson got the lead. We got to see MJF get himself disqualified going down 0-2 only to use it to his advantage and tie it 2-2. If you're asking how, there are no breaks between the falls, so when MJF went for a pin, as soon as that one finished, he went for another one. We got to see MJF being tormented to tears, all while Danielson laughed in his face. We had a blood-soaked MJF in tears as Danielson wrenched his leg, and yet we saw a resilient MJF hold on and stop himself from tapping. And we got a beautiful finale where he holds off until the bell rings. And we think it ends in a 3-3 tie, only for the news to break that the match is going into sudden death. And it is here we see a masterful character work from MJF. He's tired of this. He wants to end this, so he goes to grab the championship and he wants to use it on Danielson before the ref stops him. Bryce Remsburg lets him know it's sudden death, so if you want to go ahead and test me and get DQ'd and lose that title, be my guest. And we get to see MJF struggle with this. He wants to escape this hell that Danielson has put him in this Iron Man match, but not at the expense of the one thing that matters to him, the only thing that matters to him. So he gives it up, except he pulls out the Dynamite Diamond Ring and tries to use it on Danielson, only for him to counter. We see Danielson hit the running knee, and Tony Khan, I swear I hate you so much because you had my heart beating thinking that Danielson was actually going to win the damn thing. It was one of the best false finishes I've ever experienced. The match ends when MJF uses an oxygen canister on Danielson. He hits him in the head with it when the ref doesn't see it, and he uses the LeBell Lock to force Danielson to submit. An all-time great Iron Man match, a match that proves MJF can go the distance, and a match that sets the precedent for MJF's future defenses. The future is extremely bright for AEW. There's a great crop of talent that could challenge for any of their titles. It was an all-time great show, and I can't wait to see what more they have in store.